This is Autoline After Hours with John McElroy
and Gary Vasilash.
Episode 469 for June 20th of 2019. 2020 Palisade, Hyundai throws down the gauntlet. And Gary, we're obviously not in the studio. Tell the audience where we're at.
Autoline, Idaho. It's a beautiful day. It's sunshiny, and we've got quite a vehicle to talk about.
And what's in the background is the resort that all of us in the media are staying at to go on this launch of the new Hyundai Palisade. And we're going to give you a little bit of a flavor of what it's like to be on a media launch, as we also tell you what this vehicle's all about. And Gary, tell them what we're going to be telling them about.
So we're going to break this car down outside, inside, and all around. We start out by having Chris Chapman, who is the head of design for Hyundai in the United States. Is going to give us a view of this vehicle in a way that you're not going to get anywhere else. We've got Brian Smith, who's the Chief Operating Officer for Hyundai, who's going to talk about what the vehicle means to the company, and he'll talk about some of his other vehicles and why they're still involved in sedans and other people aren't. And then we have we'll have Mike O'Brien, who's the Vice President of Product, Corporate, and IT Planning for Hyundai. Big title, but Mike knows all of the aspects of this vehicle. He knows the design, he knows the engineering, he knows it all.
And then we're also going to bring in a couple of our journalist colleagues, Nik Miles and Mica, to get some of their impressions about the vehicle. So you're about to learn a lot about the new Hyundai Palisade, and we'll kick it all off right after this. Watch Autoline After Hours live at Autoline.tv every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 12 p.m. Pacific. You can subscribe to this podcast for free by searching for Autoline in iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion. Lear, a global leader in automotive seating and electrical systems. And by Borg Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world.
Chris Chapman is the head of Hyundai Motor America Design, and of course we've got the new Palisade here. And Chris, let's do a walk around of the vehicle, and we'll start with the side, because one of the things that you emphasized in the presentation was the stance and the balance of the vehicle.
Yeah.
Why don't you explain what you're talking about here?
Yeah, this is something new for us at Hyundai, actually, because we've relied so much on the wedge design in the past vehicles. So this, we feel, is our first vehicle where we're getting kind of the balance and the leveling out, the stability of the vehicle from front to rear. So this character line is really key relative to giving a four-wheel drive stance, giving the power to all four wheels equally, and that is just so important to SUVs around the world, really. This runs, as I mentioned, front to rear, so headlight to tail light. We have a very stable belt line, a very stable and equalized stance to the vehicle, and everything is sort of balanced out. We've got a wonderful set of sculpture, and then what I want to mention about really successful SUVs, in my opinion, are two elements. The front door shut line relative to the front wheel, while that is on some vehicles rather long, it gives a rear-wheel drive emphasis. Ours is a bit shorter right there, which again puts the balance on the four wheels. And the second thing is the C-pillar. The C-pillar is so critical and crucial relative to it being a column. A lot of times the C-pillar is a little bit fore or aft of the rear tire, and what we end up having is a mismatch with regard to it sitting on the rear wheel. When it can sit on the rear wheel, it gives that power and that robustness.
And sitting on the rear wheel, you mean how this column seems to come right down to the tire?
We often described it as the 6 in former times, so it's the sort of line that describes around here, and then it wraps around the wheel. And of course on the other side of the vehicle it's a real apparent. It's a backwards 6 on this side, but when that sort of misses the tire, it sort of gives a disjoint to the stability of the vehicle. But we've got a really wonderful situation, a really wonderful relationship of this sheet metal sitting right atop that rear wheel, kind of like a column would sit in the Acropolis.
You're emphasizing the C-pillar rather than the D-pillar, which some OEMs do the D-pillar on a vehicle of this size.
Yeah.
So what was the rationale?
We noticed a lot of glass in the vehicle. We have a feeling of a panorama type of glass wraparound. Even though we have a D-pillar underneath, it's black and it's glass. We wanted to give this idea that you had almost like this wraparound feeling of visual towards the rear of the vehicle. So there's a lot of glass, but we opted to, instead of having a full glass panel all the way from front to rear, to give that kind of power and that robustness here. We felt it was really important to the clasping nature of the vehicle, the interlocking nature of the vehicle as a theme.
Also, it looks like you brought in this bright work to further emphasize the C-pillar.
Yeah, so in combination with what's happening in the headlight and the taillight in terms of this wrapping around and holding the ends of the vehicle, we have again this sort of like situation where we have like this holding on. So the chrome, especially on the black car, you can see it's really wonderful. It goes around, cuts off the top of the C-pillar and goes like this. So you end up this sort of grabbing onto to the C-pillar. And then we have sort of a subtle indication with regard to that kind of interlocking kind of jog there in the wheel spat. It's similar to our Kona, but it's a little bit more refined, a little bit more subtle.
Let's go to the front end because there's a lot that we ought to talk about here too. And I think you got to start with the grill on this vehicle, don't you? Because boy, you've really emphasized that.
Well, our grill is our Cascade signature grill. It's more of a truck proportion, but I would say a truck proportion in the relative idea that we've got a vertical sort of headlight array. Trucks usually have a wide grill. Cars have a slightly narrow grill with a horizontal headlight. We have a graphic of the upper part of what would be the headlight, although the headlight is really existing down in the lower part of the bumper. But we have these vertical DRL lights that are quite amazing. It gives a really strong impression. And what used to be the first read in car design relative to proportion is now sort of shifting. We were noticing that in automotive design, DRLs are becoming like the first read from a long distance away. You can identify the vehicle. And so we have this piercing action with the DRL. And what's really important is this space in between the top part of the DRL and the bottom part of the DRL. It gives a reflective kind of quality of what we call a predator emerging from the water. So it's a really interesting thing when you see this vehicle come up on your rear view mirror.
This is perhaps the biggest vehicle that you guys have worked on. Is that the case?
That's correct, yeah.
So did you work with size to your advantage, or did you try to minimize the look of size?
We first wanted to make sure that we offered plenty of room. So something that we do differently as designers with regard to the tumble home, for instance, is we usually get an engineering package that has a tumble home that is maybe something like this. And typically designers go the opposite way. They tighten up the cabin. We knew that this vehicle was meant for families, and we wanted to optimize that. So to celebrate that, we actually went outboard with the tumble home, about 35 millimeters per side, to really give that spacious kind of a feel. So a large cabin atop a robust body, not too ostentatious with regard to the volumes of the vehicle, but we did want it to be strong and stable and iconic, really.
First time in history, I think, that somebody's ever taken away.
I think the engineers were really happy about that. Yeah, but we really thought that was an honest approach to the design. We thought that it was meaningful. If we're going to say family, we got to mean family, and we got to deliver on that. And I think when you drive around in the vehicle, there's a subtle feeling of a little bit more space than the sort of regular car that you would encounter in this class.
And while we're at the front, I mean, a lot of car companies have this new approach whereby everything pretty much looks the same. All you're doing is shrinking or expanding, and you guys are not doing that. I mean, if we look at the front of this car, it doesn't look like the Kona. It doesn't look like the Sonata. It doesn't look like anything else you guys are doing.
Exactly. We used to have what was known as sort of a family look, but we realized that each class of vehicle requires a different type of customer, and that we wanted to honor that and make sure that we were giving differentiation between something like a Kona all the way up to something like this, or in between the Santa Fe. So we needed to offer slightly different looks and make sure that we, sort of give the customer what they really want in terms of differentiation. It's important that when you arrive at a red light, you look over and you go, oh, that's a nice car over there, but it's not mine. It's not just a bigger version of that one, for instance. So it was a really important aspect to it. And I would say one of the last things about the front end, too, that I want to bring about is kind of a modern feel to it. There's not a whole lot of offsets. There's not a whole lot of 3D going on here. We have sculpture, but we really smooth things out. And so the differentiation between one surface to the next is only like 20 millimeters or so at the most. So it gives a real modern feel, a real aerodynamic feel to the vehicle. The side has a lot of sculpture, the rear has a lot of sculpture, but we wanted to make the front feel very quiet and sleek and slim.
Well, let's take a look at some of that rear sculpture, because that's what completes the styling tour here.
Yeah. Well, I think you really understand the vehicle from rear or rear three-quarter with regard to the sectioning of the vehicle. Quite often as designers, we deal with the shoulder of the car. If the car is a shoulder car, it means from the belt line down, you come out, and it's supposed to portray an element of strength, right? Just like here, the deltoids, right? Well, on vehicles that are really tall, vehicles that are really short, the distance between the tire or the wheel spat is quite short. On a vehicle like this, it's really, really tall. And so what designers want, they want their cake and eat it too. They end up wanting to do a big shoulder and they want a big wheel flare, right? Well, here it was really important for them to understand that because of the distance between the belt line and the wheel spat is so great, you need to minimize the shoulder, you need to minimize the deltoid, and really emphasize the bicep, which is really what's happening over here. And I think by doing that, in combination with bringing the tumble home out, really gives a kind of feeling of volume, strength, stability. So if you've got a large head, let's just say, all right, you want to make sure you have a stable base. And so that really kind of helped us do and achieve that.
And talk about the tail lamps a little bit,
Yeah.
and especially the bright work that goes
Yeah.
around that.
Yeah. Well, we have, like with the headlights, this sort of threading down through the bottom here in the reflector area. Again, it pierces through the sheet metal area here visually or graphically, and it helps sort of clasp, that clasping sort of theme that's happening throughout the entire car. This Rubik Cube theme that the designer was working with really gave us a unique and a character feel for the entire vehicle. So it's sort of harmonized throughout the car. The belt line molding, the bright work, the metal work is just a really nice way to sort of portray that kind of strength. It's like it's clicked together like a Chinese woodblock puzzle.
So you guys have even designed the exhaust pipes.
Yes.
Very nicely here.
Everything's designed.
I mean, and so if we look at it, they seem to even be two different sizes.
Yeah, well, it's just a balance. I mean, I think they're basically the same size visually or whatever because of the turn and the plan view. They move a bit. The one on the outside is probably about 3 or 4 millimeters wider to sort of emphasize the thing. If you go to places like Disneyland and you see things like forced perspective, you look up at the buildings that they have there, okay? They're actually quite short, but because they made the second and the third story one shorter than the next, it looks a lot taller than it really is. And little tricks like that kind of help make the car look a little bit wider, make the feel a little bit more robust.
Is that something that other OEMs do? I mean, like look
I don't know.
to that.
I don't know. We learn our lessons in design, and we share, and we exchange what we think. You know, I use a lot of analogies, a lot of philosophy like that. We learn through architecture and all the tricks that we can do, because we're given a certain width and we have this width to deal with, and you want to try to maximize that. So what ends up happening is the designers are always begging for more width, bigger tires, lower car, everything. All of those factors play a part, but the fact is that you're going to get sliced off right here, so you got to go, okay, you got to pull your bag of tricks out and try to figure out a way to make it look stronger.
Well, I think that's a real good overview of the exterior styling of the vehicle. Thanks for that, Chris, but I think we all better pile in the vehicle right now and continue on our road trip. on the launch of every new vehicle for the media. Of course, you drive all over the place, typically for many hours, but you've always got to stop for lunch. And that's where we're at right now. We're at a place called the Lodgepole Bar and Grill in Moscow, Idaho. And we've got Brian Smith with us right now. He's the Chief Operating Officer of Hyundai Motor America. And Brian, let's talk about the Palisade, because this has got to be huge for you guys to add this to your lineup.
It really is, John. You know, Palisade is entering really as our 6th CUV, and it's at the top end of the line, so these are going to be new buyers coming to the brand. We couldn't be happier about the extension now and what this is doing for Hyundai.
Well, not only that, I mean, this is a big vehicle and 3 rows of seats. That's really got to open up the market for Hyundai to class of consumers you haven't really been able to reach.
Absolutely right. You know, we do well with families, but there's an opportunity for growth, and we've never really offered a vehicle that has this kind of capability.
Well, it's not only big, but I mean the execution of this in terms of styling inside and out seems to be almost upper level. I mean, is this part of your strategy to attract people to come to the brand?
It starts to feel a little premium on the inside,
yes, it does.
Doesn't it? It's you know, I think the technology, the fit and finish on the vehicle, the styling, really from day one, we've talked about how the styling looks very premium with the flush glass. You don't see that typically you know, on vehicles in general market, and so I think Palisade's going to surprise a lot of people, bring a lot of new, almost luxury buyers to our brand.
You mentioned 6 CUVs / SUV, I suppose, too. You still got another one coming, though, at the bottom end. So that's going to give you 7 of them, right?
Absolutely, and that's what's so cool. They're not just replacements. We've had that with a freshened Tucson and all-new Santa Fe. But to be able to bring Venue in below Kona with Palisade on the high end, that's what's really making this extension of the lineup so amazing and productive for us.
So, was this something that you guys at Hyundai have been thinking about for a while and just waited until you got it right, or was this something that, you know, was, geez, we've got to react to this market because it's hot?
No, you know, we've had vehicles that were close to this with a Santa Fe XL for the last year. Palisade puts it into a whole new part of the market. It's, you know, midsize is really the 2nd largest segment in the entire industry now, behind subcompact. So there's really an opportunity for us to grow a lot. This isn't just a little bit of a step. This is a big step into a big section of the market.
It really is, because I want to say, if I've got this right, 3 years ago you only had 3 CUVs in your lineup. So to go from 3 to 7 in a very short amount of time is probably going to be a real jolt for your sales.
You're right, John, and it's not even just the number of CUVs. We've got alternative powertrains, right? You know about Kona. When Kona launched, within 10 months we had the all-electric version of Kona. We've got Nexo with the fuel cell also up kind of at the top end. So it's not just an expanding CUV lineup, but we're really starting to get experience, and consumers ultimately are going to decide which of all these technologies in powertrains are right for them. But Hyundai's working in all of them.
So what attracts someone to the Hyundai brand for a CUV rather than going with one of the more traditional choices?
Well, I like to think a lot of it is our brand right now. I've got 2 young daughters, and they absolutely love everything about Hyundai. So when I think about people coming into the industry, that's obviously the growth engine that all manufacturers are after, is how do you appeal to young people? They love the Hyundai brand. They love the messaging on commercials. They love the events that we're involved in. Hope on Wheels is a huge thing with young people. And there's just a lot of things Hyundai's doing that go far beyond just the product that are attracting people to the brand.
In this business, of course, fresh product solves a lot of sins, maybe all of them, in fact. You guys have launched something like 10 models, including refreshes, in just a year's time.
Exactly.
Can you keep that going, though? Because we often see this with car companies. You know, they bring out a bunch of product and then they fall into a trough, and it takes years for it to come back up.
Yeah, you're right. Even if it's a year or 2, that lull can always be difficult. We work really hard with the teams in Seoul to have good timing and a good cadence to the product lineup. You know, it's never optimal, but we have a lot of stuff coming that you're going to be excited about. And I hope to see you guys on a number of events in the future.
You know, you mentioned that you have alternative powertrains. So not only do you have the hybrid, you have electric, and you even have fuel cell technology.
Right.
So, I mean...
And plug-in.
And plug-in. And, I mean, it's rather astonishing because there are companies that are much larger than Hyundai is, at least in the U.S. market,
right,
that maybe have a couple of those. So, I mean, what is this about Hyundai that'll, you know, as John said, you guys are fast, and then you have like high technology.
Gary, when I joined the company almost 18 months ago, I heard the word Hyundai Speed a lot, and I didn't know exactly what they meant. They're quick to react. They make quick changes to production when we need to, based on consumer input. They can do things I've never seen before, and ironically, they just want to move. They want to be first to market. They want to do it right, and there's all kinds of new technology coming.
Right.
You saw some of it in the cars today, but
right.
They really, really are thinking. Some of the best technology companies in the world come out of South Korea, when you think of some of the big partner companies. So I'm excited about what's still ahead.
Yeah, you guys signed the another agreement with Aurora Technologies for the development of autonomous technology just last week, and just moving on all fronts, it seems.
You're absolutely right, and everybody wears several hats. I've never seen an organization quite as efficient as we are, and that's good and bad. Oftentimes we're pushing our people hard. The designers I know feel that way, the engineers, but when they turn out products like this, it just makes everybody feel like all that hard work is worth it.
Brian, the Telluride is the sort of the cousin vehicle to this on the Kia brand side. The Telluride is going to be made in the U.S. The Palisade is coming in from Korea. I'm curious why there wasn't an opportunity maybe to put the same, the two vehicles in one plant.
You're not the only one that has that question and is frustrated with it. We're working right now on other opportunities to bring more products to be produced in the United States. I wouldn't rule anything out. We're going to make some announcements in the near future, but there's also a lot of other things that go into the decision on what plant is going to produce a vehicle beyond just where we'd love to have it come. But Hyundai's committed to building where we sell, and we're going to continue to grow here in the United States, so you never know. Keep your eyes open.
Okay.
Another vehicle that is coming from you guys, which was announced at the New York Auto Show, was a all-new Sonata. Now, you guys make the Elantra, and that has just undergone some modifications, and we see other OEMs pulling back from making cars. You guys aren't.
Not at all. In fact,
and why?
I like to say we're doubling down because think about it. I mean, it's 5 million units still every year. They're two really healthy segments. You can look at the car segment as all these different small fractured pieces to it, and that's true. But when you look at compact and midsize and even subcompact car segment grew last month, year over year. Go figure. So there are still people that are looking for what a sedan offers, but what they want is the style and the excitement that comes with that new Sonata we introduced in New York. Mm-hmm. It was shocking to me, the reaction, not only from the media, but from the consumers over that week.
So it seems that in terms of the styling of that car, that doubled down on that one because the last generation sort of pulled back from the generation before, right, which really set the world on fire in terms of styling for a mid-size sedan. So it seems that Hyundai is saying, hey, let's let our designers really bring this brand forward.
Do what worked in the previous generation. I happen to love the styling of the current one. I drive one, and to me it's a great styled vehicle, but we do hear from people that, boy, if you go back to the generation before, had a lot more style to it. It was more cutting edge, a little bit edgier. So that's definitely where the design team has gone with the new Sonata, and I love it. It was fabulous.
The Palisade presumably is going to be quite a profitable vehicle for Hyundai. Globally, Hyundai's profits have been under a lot of pressure the last couple of years. Can Hyundai Motor America really start contributing more to the bottom line with all these vehicles that we've been talking about?
That's absolutely our goal, and I will tell you the answer is yes. Developing 10 new products just for the United States doesn't come cheap. So there's been a huge investment in new products. There's been an investment in technology. We've added a third engine plant in Alabama. So along with the big factory that's putting out 3 of our top volume vehicles today, we're building a lot of engines there. So I really believe that you're going to start to see the payback now. With the addition of Jose Munoz, we've got a lot of new thinking around where the brand could go, and with a real focus on North America. And of course, that's the United States.
Yeah, and I would also think the fact that you guys have been able to lower your sales incentives in the U.S. while the rest of the market is sort of staying flat, maybe down a little bit, but you guys have dropped somewhat. That's got to help financially from that standpoint.
You're absolutely right. It costs a lot of money to play in this market. And we've certainly been almost down 10% this year, to your point.
That's a lot.
Which is huge. In an industry that's actually softening, that's usually one of the reactions OEMs have to do in a market that's declining a little, is start to push on incentives. To your point, there's been a lot of restraint across all the OEMs. which I'm glad to see. And but we've been able to actually, and it's just it's a measure of how exciting the cars are. All those new vehicles are bringing more and more buyers to the Hyundai dealers, and the dealers are doing a fabulous job taking care of customers. So we have been able to pull back quite a bit on incentives.
How much of the numbers that you guys are seeing are customers who are coming in and say, Hyundai's got that great warranty, it's still the best warranty in the business, and they look at it from that point of view because they feel safe? Is that something, or is that going away, and that the styling and the product selection is now commanding its own space?
Well, I would say yes to that, but it is not going away. The 10100 is still, it's funny, it's not the first thing people talk about. We work closely with our dealer council, and we've been asking them for the last year, how important is that? Is that something now that we still need to, because it's not cheap to continue to offer the best warranty. And they say, no, absolutely. Customers come in expecting that now with Hyundai, right? So they'd start talking about all the other things that are bringing them to the brand. But if you ever said, what if we could pull back on that? Absolutely not. We want to still be known for the best, absolute best warranty in the industry. It's still very valuable.
Mm-hmm. What are we missing here? Anything, Brian? What would you like to communicate with our audience about of what's going on at Hyundai that Gary and I have not yet asked you about?
Well, you asked me about pretty much everything, but let me tell you, I would say the next big frontier for us is the customer experience. When you think about the product line, SUV is great, but with an all-new Sonata coming, and what we've seen in the future, obviously Elantra, Tucson are two of our biggest volume vehicles. They are the most stunning new refreshes coming when you see those vehicles of anything.
That Sonata that stands out.
They're terrific, and so the product is great. And now we're starting to work closely with our dealers on, people are buying cars differently. They're spending more time online. They're doing a lot more of the research. And we want to make sure our dealers are working closely with customers, even in that experience. Shopper Assurance, you've probably heard about, is our digital shopping process that we encourage all customers to spend time with. And we want the dealers to then be comfortable as a customer comes in, having done all that research, a simple, easy, quick, very little negotiation, spend more time working on the car. Is it the right vehicle for you? And that's going to be an interesting new frontier for us, to really work on that experience being a differentiator for the brand.
Well, along those lines, there's all this talk and a little bit of experimentation in subscription services. That anything on your radar screen?
It is, and I love the term subscription because I think, maybe I'll use a little different version, but packaging. What I think are really drawing people, and especially young people, to that idea of subscription is a one-stop shop. They write one check or they make one payment. They don't write checks anymore. One payment out of their account,
Apple
and they're
Pay.
covering the maintenance, the insurance, and their vehicle payment all in one. We've done a little experimentation with that with the Ioniq launch. We called it a subscription. It's really a package like that. And we have a couple of teams right now, both within HMA and also within our finance company, working on projects that would bundle those kinds of services that customers want and need. And it just makes life simpler. There's no reason not to do it if you can figure out how to make it packaged.
Well, good. Well, with that, we're going to wrap this up. But thanks so much for your time, Brian. Yeah, very interesting. And it's amazing to see how Hyundai, certainly in the U.S. market, is kind of making a roaring comeback right now.
Yeah, well, we are, and we're going to keep it going based on everything we're hearing. Yeah, we appreciate you guys do a great job with the vehicles. Even the fact that you're testing out that third row seat, John, that meant a lot.
I sat in the back of the vehicle really coming here to lunch.
Yeah.
That's
and
exactly
it drives
right.
very quickly, too, I happen to notice.
And I found that out as well. Yeah,
Okay.
you guys have been great.
Well, we're going to have to take a break because we are going to continue our test drive of the Palisade.
The world is changing at an ever-increasing pace. No matter what the mode of transportation, there is always the need for an efficient propulsion system. And that's exactly what BorgWarner has been doing since the earliest days of the automotive industry. We create innovative mobility technologies that reduce energy consumption and emissions while improving performance. Our proven track record has made us an industry leader in forward-looking propulsion solutions for combustion, hybrid, and electric vehicles.
So we've seen the outside of the Palisade, we've learned about the Palisade, now we're inside the Palisade, and John is actually driving the Palisade, and we have an after-hours favorite on the show, Mike O'Brien, who's been on the show many times. Mike, for those of you who are not familiar with him, is the Vice President of Product, Corporate, and IT Planning for Hyundai Motor America. So welcome back, Mike.
Good to be back.
So you know this car inside and out. Tell us some aspects of the vehicle as we're sitting here in the vehicle as John is driving it.
So when you think about basically two things we'll talk about, packaging and we'll talk about materials and really design execution. In terms of packaging, there were two things that we really wanted to focus on with this product. One is mom and dad would really prefer not to get out of the driver's seat when they want their kids to get back to the third row seat of a 3-row SUV. They'd really like the idea of them, their small children, to be able to access the third row seat without their help and buckle themselves in. So we focused very heavily on a second row that was very easy to operate by very small and young people, so they could get access to the third row without much trouble. Now, when you look at the outgoing model, we have, just like we had with the outgoing model, we had a bench seat with 7 passengers with the outgoing model. We also had a captain's chair version, which was a 6-passenger SUV. Now with this new one, the Palisade, we have a 7 and 8 passengers. So we're in the captain's chair model right now. And in that case, we have a very easy to articulate seat, which is one thing, but also we've created a lot more width through better interior packaging, so kids can just walk through between the 2 captain's chairs to get to the third row seat without accessing seat movement mechanism at all. With the bench seat model, of course, we made it so it's easy to operate. But with this model, we widened that space so kids could run back and forth when they're getting in or out of the vehicle quite easily. So that was a big part of packaging. The other big part of packaging was to make sure that we had a very generous third row accommodation, not just for people, but also for cargo.
John, you actually sat in that third row, didn't you?
I did, and even though you're kind of sitting on your tailbone, there's not a lot of thigh support, there's a surprising amount of knee support, and you've got the third row back reclines a bit. So you're clearly thinking about making this more comfortable for third row passengers.
We did. So we made it so the third row can be tilted. We have a power third row seat, so you could change the seat back angle to, and of course, lean it back if you don't have a lot of cargo, and keep it more upright if you want to carry a lot of cargo on a vacation. Or if you're going to Costco or Sam's Club and you got a big load of groceries. So we give a lot of flexibility to the customer in terms of packaging. And we also have a very flat load floor, so when you move the second row and the third row down, a very flat surface for very large objects to put in the vehicle. So that's really about package. Where do we really focus on improving? It was really focused on family. It was focused on really having a generous amount of space for all 3 rows for both the driver and the passengers to have a good traveling vehicle, a good vehicle for a big family. Then when you move on to design, it was a different discussion altogether. So there we wanted to focus on a lot of versatility in terms of storage. So if you were to pan around the car, you'd see a generous under storage area below the gear shift area. You could put a large handbag, a small duffel bag under there. We have a very large area where the cup holders are, for both secure storage, but also a very clever cup holder mechanism that allows you to get all that space back when you don't have a big gulp cup in the cup holder areas. So you get all that space back with a very clever mechanism for operating the cup holders. But one of the things that enabled us to have a much larger area in the center console was going to a shift-by-wire. So with a conventional shift, there's either a lever with a long rod, or there's a lever attached to a cable. And all of that takes a lot of space underneath the surface the customer sees. So I see the shifter, but underneath that there's a lot of hardware, and it takes up valuable space. So by going to electronically controlled a shift-by-wire system, we were able to take all that space back and turn it into customer storage space. So it's basically grabbing back a lot of space we otherwise would have lost. We've done the same thing in terms of adding convenience in terms of door storage for both bottles as well as small items in the doors. We have very clever features here. We have a small pocket for phones, so if you're listening to your headphones, we have a dedicated space like a kangaroo pouch back here to put a small item like a cell phone. We have USB ports, 7 of them, and they're in each seat back you can see here. So every user in this vehicle has their own USB port, so they can drive their own tablet or other device at their will and provide their own entertainment. We also have an intercom system that allows a couple of things. One, it allows people in the front to speak to people in the back without worrying about not being heard. But it also allows you to attenuate the audio system, multimedia system, so you can focus on the front if you want kids to get a little nap in the back. And you can basically have a lot more control in terms of sound attenuation. In terms of just pure design, there was a really big focus on materials and having a real flagship level of material quality in this product. Remember, when we started this project a few years ago, already the large car category was declining rapidly. In fact, at that time, I think fleet sales were almost 50% of the category. So when you look at products like the Azera, that was a class-leading product, it was in a very rapidly declining segment, like the Ford 500 and other products in that area, the Impala. And so rather than fight history, we decided to focus on this car being our new flagship product for the Hyundai brand. We wanted this to represent the very top product in the Hyundai brand in our stores that sell the Hyundai products. So everything about the interior design was focused on the flagship level of quality and execution. So the pleating, the Napa leather that's available on our top trim, the material selection for wood-like materials, the speaker grills, if you look at them, a tremendous amount of effort was placed in the detailing to give a very high-tech and modern appearance. Overall, the design, I think Chris Chapman mentioned earlier, was really focused on a forward thinking of how you interpret the SUV category. Not really a traditional think, but really focused on a very modern execution of SUV and something really looking out into the future in terms of execution. So it was all about materials and execution. It's about having valuable storage space and grab all the space we can through clever packaging. It's about having generous seating and cargo capability, but also easy operation and access, even for small children. So that was really the overall thinking in terms of the interior direction for this car.
Mike, you'd mentioned the previous generation. That would be the Santa Fe XL, but
yes.
this is an all-new vehicle.
All new vehicle.
So it almost strikes me that this isn't the next generation. This seems to me to be a totally new vehicle. I mean, just
You're right, and I speak that in a rather conservative tone because, if you look at it just as an analyst, you'd say, well, this is the vehicle that replaced it. But in fact, it's really a new category vehicle for us. The old vehicle was very narrow. It didn't have good third row access. It only sat two people in the third row. It was a much smaller vehicle. It was a completely different platform. We didn't have nearly the advantage in terms of packaging and chassis advancements and basic platform advancements we have with this vehicle.
What about the powertrain? Tell us a little bit about that.
So this vehicle is very clever. There's a number of these out, not many, a few, but this is an Atkinson cycle V6 engine, a 3.8 liter, develops 291 horsepower and 262 foot-pounds of torque. What's truly unique about this powertrain is that it's both Otto and Atkinson, not one or the other. Typically you find one or the other. Most powertrains are Otto, and a few are Atkinson, but this has both operational modes. It fully switches back and forth.
How does it do that, Mike? How do you go from an Otto cycle to an Atkinson?
It's a dramatically extended range CVVT, or continuously valve timing and lift adjustability. So an Atkinson cycle engine basically has a delayed intake valve closure, and so you basically shorten the stroke in the Atkinson cycle, so it lowers the compression ratio. So that's very
How
good
do you
for,
shorten the stroke?
Because the intake valve is delayed closure, so the compression stroke doesn't start till later.
So you're not doing it, Nissan's got this sort of variable compression. You're not doing it that way.
No, this is much simpler. So we do it very simple using the existing hardware. So it's really hardware fusion, you would call it, because we're using the same continuously valve timing mechanism. We're just extending its range of usefulness, its range of operation, the amount of degrees it can adjust. And so by doing so, by delaying that intake valve closure, the compression stroke doesn't start till that valve closes. And then you end up with that shorter stroke, which is very efficient for cruising speeds or low power application. But when you need power, in the Otto cycle, it's a full 13-to-1 compression ratio, which is quite impressive.
That's huge.
So it is huge for a gasoline engine, and it allows you to have great power and great drivability at the same time.
I mean, you'd expect that in a very high-performance car, not in a big SUV.
But see, now by having this Atkinson plus Otto cycle engine, we could manage the way we operate that engine throughout its range and be able to, therefore, have that higher compression ratio.
Ordinarily, the Atkinson cycle's used in vehicles that are aimed at fuel efficiency, so hybrid
they're really
cars
more focused on fuel efficiency
and
only.
Auto is more about power
Performance, yes.
So by combining these two, you get the best of both worlds in effect.
Exactly, and that's how we're able to get to a car that can very robustly tow 5,000 pounds and be a car of this size and weight class and still have very good power performance and good fuel economy at a combined rating of 22.
You mentioned this is shift-by-wire. Is there anything else about the transmission that is different?
A lot of refinements were done. So this is our 8-speed. We've developed this internally. We've done a lot to improve its efficiency. So older design had roller bearings, which is a line contact. And if you can go from a line contact to a point contact with a ball bearing, you improve friction, you reduce friction, and therefore improve efficiency. So we move from some roller bearing elements to twin row ball bearing elements. We've also cut the number of spool valves in the valve body from 20 to 12. And by doing that, you reduce the internal leakage that's natural with any kind of valve body or spool valve operation. And by reducing the internal leakage, we're able to go to a much smaller transmission fluid pump, which transmits or transfers into improved efficiency. So we're pumping less fluid, more efficient. We've also gone from typically you have a single plate torque converter lockup mechanism. We've gone to a multiple plate torque converter lockup mechanism, which is a much smoother operation, allows us to control it much more effectively. So a lot of things that were really more about refinement and smoothness and efficiency improvement in the transaxle.
You know, one of the things that's interesting about this car is, we're recording inside the vehicles. It's very quiet. The engine's running. You guys paid a significant amount of attention to attenuating or blocking sound. Can you talk about that?
We did, and it was, again, because of this, from the very beginning, the concept was flagship product for the Hyundai brand. We spent a lot of time in very clever ways. For example, typically when you develop a floor stamping, it's based on a lot of things. For example, chassis mounting, crash management, energy management, space considerations, material considerations, and manufacturability. In this case, we added something new. We also managed to think about what was the best combination of stamping pattern and die pattern that would commit to or contribute to a better sound isolation or noise isolation characteristics. So we looked at combining those typical asphalt-based padding with construction or the design of the floor pan so we can minimize noise with both, not just with one, not with taking what could be a noisy floor pan design and then trying to quiet it with sound absorption materials, but instead developing them both simultaneously to minimize the amount of extra absorbent material we would require, which contributes to weight reduction. So that was one clever thing we did. There's a lot of injected foam in the pillar areas. There was a lot of effort made to have noise isolation in all those areas that generate noise. Suspension mounting points in the rear, for example. We have a high strength connection beams that are welded into the body structure to minimize transmission of noise from the rear suspension joints. In the front, we focused on a similar tactic in the low toe board areas of reinforcement to minimize the intrusion of noise from the front wheel area. In terms of wind noise, it was all about foam injection, and then we have optionally on the upper trim, we have a 3-section glass, like we have with a windshield for the side glass to further isolate noise.
So it's a laminated glass.
Yes, laminated glass for the driver and passenger door in the front.
John, it sounds like they're trying to overachieve here, and I get this sense that by doing all of these countermeasures, it's rather phenomenal. I've never heard of a floor stamping being looked at from the point of view of acoustics.
No, I've not heard of that either. But clearly, Mike, you guys, if you're going to make this the flagship, you really got to put your best foot forward with Hyundai going for the first time with a full-size vehicle like this.
Clearly, our engineers wanted to make sure when this product was brought to market, that it would be clearly seen as that kind of a product that clearly that our goals that we set out for in terms of elevating this above its category in terms of key product attributes would be clearly seen by our buyers, and so that was really the basis of all this extra effort and extra cost and time that we put into it.
Mike, the other thing, let's go back to the powertrain a minute. This is a big V6, 3.8 liter, right? And if you look at the new Ford Explorer that's coming out about the same time as this, they went with a Turbo 4. Is that anything that you considered, and why did you go with the big V6?
Well, it really comes down to one simple word. For us, it was robust. Many things in our industry are very heavily regulated, whether it's airbag operation, automatic emergency brake, or for example, or ABS. There's very strict FMVSS regulations on performance for many aspects of vehicle design. One area where there isn't so much is tow rating. So tow rating, really it's the manufacturer's job to determine what is capable for their vehicle. In our case, we wanted to make sure that we had a very high level of confidence that our 5,000-pound tow rating could handle a number of different wide-ranging circumstances, whether it's very high heat, very high mountain loads that when you're climbing or descending, very good thermal characteristics for brake, transmission, transaxle, engine. And so we wanted to make sure that by having that kind of robustness and, well, I'll call it headroom, engineering headroom in the design, we adopted this 3.8 engine knowing that this would be a very robust powertrain for towing, and it would confidently tow 5,000 pounds.
So this is a standard powertrain for the vehicle. Is there a special package that someone must get in order to tow with this vehicle?
I'm sorry to report, no. So it comes standard with a heavy-duty transmission fluid cooler. It comes standard with pre-wiring for a Class 3 hitch. We offer a factory option for the Class 3 hitch. There's nothing that's extra you add except for one thing. We have optionally available self-leveling rear suspension. And unlike the days of old where you had to fill up an airbag with a Schrader valve and an air compressor, in this vehicle it automatically self-levels, and that brings a tremendous amount of benefits for people that are towing. You know, of course, when you have a lot of sag in the back, your headlamps are aiming up. They shouldn't be. Your steering geometry has changed, so not only the steering characteristics could deteriorate, but also it could advance tire wear to an unacceptable level. So having the right posture in your vehicle is very important when you're carrying a heavy tow load. And most manufacturers of towed vehicles will say 10 to 15% should be on the trailer hitch, so that you can get up to 500 pounds of trailer towing load vertically. And so we have to make sure that we have a nice even posture to the vehicle for good road control and those other things I mentioned. And so that's the only optional thing available is the self-leveling rear suspension.
And then 8-speed automatic, is that
standard?
Right?
That's standard. So one transmission, one powertrain. And as far as towing concerned, the only two options are the hitch itself and the self-leveling rear suspension.
One of the things that we hear automakers talking about all the time now, let's get into two different topics. UX, the user experience or the user interface, and then all the safety equipment that's coming out now. Why don't we start with the UX part of it? What have you guys done to really enhance the man-machine interface?
Well, we're very gratified that we've been recognized in the industry with a number of awards very recently with Santa Fe and other vehicles of having really, really outstanding UX. And our engineers have focused on not having to pick up an owner's manual to understand our multimedia interface, something that just an average person can walk into the car and be able to make a good use of the capabilities without any review of the owner's manual or instruction from people that know. So we've reflected that here. In this case, though, we've gone one step further. We've gone to a very wide screen. So I believe it's 12.3 inches is the width of that screen. We can reconfigure it in a number of ways. We can configure it in 3 separate screens. We can have it in one wide screen, as you see right here now. And so the customer has the ability, very simply, to change the way they want to show the data, and configure it the way it suits them, and have the interface that they're looking for. And it's very simple to do. Whether you see that in the multimedia system through the display, or you see it through HVAC and basic vehicle controls, the focus was on ease of use.
Yeah, and you have knobs too, which is
yes,
knobs and buttons, good things.
We've really looked at this very carefully. Our engineers have been very focused on a lot of in-depth customer research in terms of HMI and finding the right balance of touch and hard knobs.
And then I mentioned safety, too. I mean, that's all the rage these days, all the different safety systems. I'm sure you've got a full suite of safety systems on here.
Well, with Hyundai Smart Sense, we basically standardized most of the safety equipment. Of course, we have to understand that there are a few customers that want to get a big vehicle at a more affordable price. So really the only optional safety equipment is it's a side view monitor that's available, or I'm not getting the name correctly, but I'll think of it in a minute. But basically side view warning. And so that's not available on the lowest grade, but everything else is standard above our SCL premium package.
You mentioned, John mentioned the Explorer. So there are a number of vehicles in this category, the Highlander, for example, and the Honda Pilot. What vehicles did you guys benchmark when you were developing this car?
You know, we really spent more time benchmarking our customers because, benchmarking is very good and we do it. We benchmarked Highlander, we benchmarked Explorer and other vehicles of that class, but at the end of the day, that guarantees us to be 5 years behind. Because when we're benchmarking a car, that car was developed probably 5 years earlier. Mm-hmm. And so it's certainly not a way to set the mark for the future. So for us, it was really more about focusing on what customers wanted in this category. With it, of course, knowing that part of the primary shopping is looking at size and dimensions. So we have to be in the hunt when it comes to basic vehicle size and basic vehicle spec. But beyond that, when you particularly look at the interior, you'll see it was more of a reflection on what our customers wanted in terms of a big family SUV.
Mm-hmm. We're good. Well, Mike, thanks so much for coming along for the ride and telling us what we're riding around in.
Well, thank you.
Lear Connexus offers a parental controls application with geofencing that sends notifications regarding driving behavior and location, including curfew alerts, acceleration alerts, and speed alerts. All delivered to a smartphone application that includes vehicle location, driver notifications, and a report card of driving history, including notifications when predefined geographic boundaries are crossed. For more information, visit Lear.com.
Well, it's been a long day. We've been driving this Palisade all over Idaho. And to give you a wrap-up, we've asked a couple of our journalist colleagues to join us, Nik Miles and Roman Mica, and great to have you guys as part of the show here, too. And we wanted you guys because we'd love to get your impressions of the vehicle. The embargo hasn't come off. We can't talk driving impressions, but Nik, what do you think about this?
I think it's the Gauntlet, John. I think this is the throwdown from the Korean companies to America to say, we can do what you do, but we can do it with a 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty. We can do it with a technology that you're not paying extra for, and we can do it with capabilities that you really use in a real world. So I think this is a challenge to the big American three, gloves off. We're going to play in your court. Most foreign automakers have failed in the pickup truck market. Not horribly, but they've not succeeded the way they want to succeed. I think they're challenging the large SUV market.
So you think they can challenge with this one?
Yeah, I think the longevity of this comes in its resale value. So what happens to this in 2 years' time? The telltale will be how do ALG and all of the big resale valuation companies decide that this vehicle will stand the test of time. It's exactly what people want, but will it be valued will you get your money out of it in 2 years' time is the real story.
Nik, but the question, you mentioned this is a throwdown to the big three, but two of the big players in this category are Honda and Toyota with the Highlander and the Pilot.
Yeah, I think they've been very good at this category, but I think they haven't challenged, in a sense, the Americans in the same way. The price. So both of those, the Highlander is more expensive the more equipment you put in it, I think, and the same with everything else. The Americans tend to do an awful lot for these vehicles, but you have to pay for it. You look at the new Ford Explorer, the price of the high-end Explorers goes way above this.
Right.
And I think what they're doing is challenging you and say, we can do what you do, but we can do it cheaper, and we can do it with a guarantee of a 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty.
Roman, what do you think?
I think it starts at $35,000 and goes to about $45,000. People probably are curious how much it costs. No, I think it's going to sell like potato chips. Did you guys know that there's a 4-month wait for these in Korea? And there's a reason for that. It's the right vehicle at the right time with the right trim level. I mean, you're getting heated and cool seats in the front and in the second row. You're getting a vehicle that basically, in my mind, looks like a BMW X7 when you're behind the wheel for $25,000 less if you get the upper trim level. And let's talk about the T-Word, right, which is a Telluride. That one is selling, and I think this one will follow suit. So I think they've got a home run on their hands.
And you mentioned Telluride, which is the Kia cousin to this vehicle. It looks like it's off to the races to begin with, but do you think it's going to have the longevity that Nik was talking about?
Yeah, right now crossovers are red hot, and this part of the crossover segment is super red hot because there's a lot of value there. I think people love the ability to take their entire family on vacation or take their kids and their friends' kids to school. It's just the right vehicle at the right time. Will it sell as well in 4 years? Probably not, but for the next year, hell yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that these guys are offering either captain's chairs as standard in the second row or bench seats. That seems to be something that, to your point, Nik, that the Americans haven't really glommed onto.
Koreans are really good at finding the weakness in everybody else's plan. I mean, what aren't other companies doing? We heard an awful lot during presentations this morning about what the customer was asking for. The perfect example of that is customers were complaining about the tailgate closing too slowly. So they've invented a speedy closing system that closes in 1.5 seconds faster than the standard system. So they're listening to what people want, they're listening to what they don't like about their current cars, and I think the Koreans are finding the hole in the market, and they're saying people don't offer captain's chairs except in the very top trim level, or they don't often offer the captain chairs at all, or you have to pay extra for them, so let's offer them as standard. We listened to this morning in the presentation when we heard about this vehicle from Hyundai, all the things that you get with this vehicle that the competition doesn't offer, and I think that, again, is a gauntlet challenge to the rest of those makers.
It's a gauntlet, but they have to do it. These guys are late to the party. I mean, the stunning thing is how long it's taken them to get a vehicle like this or to expand their whole SUV, CUV lineup. So if you're last to the party, you better bring the best stuff. And, in terms of pricing, they have to undercut the competition because of that, because they're so late here. So I hear what you're saying. They have thrown down the gauntlet. This is a hell of a package right here. But, man, this thing really should have been out a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I mean, they saw the writing on the wall. I mean, they're also looking at, they told me in 2011 was the original plan for this. In 2011, remember, they have to be super cautious. Kia came out with that Borrego right at 2007, 2008 when the gas prices went crazy. So we know gas prices are creeping up to $4 a gallon. They're a bit sheepish about whether this large SUV, it is, Roman's right, red hot right now, but will it be red hot in 18 months? This is a long-term plan.
All right,
is 7 years.
All right, boys, I'm going to quiz you. So what are the three differences between the Palisade and the Telluride? 3 differences.
Exterior, interior, and chassis tuning.
There's actually quite more than they have told us.
The 3 big differences, according to these guys, is 1, you have the power folding third row in the Palisade. You have the big central configurable display in the Palisade, and you have shift by wire. So you have the little push button. And most interestingly, you can get this vehicle in 2-wheel drive in the upper end model.
Yeah.
So it's actually less expensive than the Telluride. So it provides you with more value. And by the way, Nik, 0 to close, 5 seconds for the tailgate. I timed it.
So there's a lot of little things that they've done on the inside of this that I think makes it a little bit more family oriented. One of the things is in the Telluride, the same thing. The push button second row flips forward, easy to get in. They have a double step on the inside, which I think is very neat. So there's somewhere to step. The cool thing about what they've done in the Palisade versus the Telluride is they put molded plastic handles on the inside of the doors, so the kid can put their hand around the C-pillar and pull themselves in. Plus, there's some different configurations in the dash where the left-hand turn camera is stationed in the Telluride is in the center display between the 2 gauges. What they've done in the Palisade is they put it in the 2 gauges themselves. So some small stuff on the interior, but I think it makes a difference. I'm still attracted to more towards the Telluride for the reason that well, I have 5 dogs. I think this is too upscale for 5 dogs. That's a little more muffin ready. I love the fact that Telluride has those grab handles down the side of the shifter. There's a few things that are just personal choices, but ostensibly they're a similar vehicle. This is for your 45 to 65 year old, and I think the Telluride is more for your 35 to your 55 year old. So we're looking at a younger more audience. I clearly fall in that younger demo. Silence from the peanut gallery. Silence.
Are you saying we're old? That's what I'm hearing, man. I don't know about you guys. Yeah.
All right. One of the things that I think is interesting, Nik, you're talking about what they're bringing to the party that isn't necessarily being brought by everyone, is across the board 5,000 pound tow rating on this thing, and every vehicle is configured with a transmission cooler to take care of towing. Is that important, or is that just basically, or maybe you have a good sense of this?
Yeah, I think
Roman?
towing is huge, and it's interesting because what's happened recently that wasn't happening in the past was there's this explosion of like personal watercraft, side-by-sides, right? People have a lot more toys now that they want to go and play with, and if you want to tow those toys, you need a vehicle that is capable of it. So in the past, I think people bought these bigger crossover SUVs because maybe they would tow a horse trailer, a small horse trailer. But now, people are out there using a lot of toys and they want to be able to tow those toys. And I think that's also part of the reason that pickup trucks are so popular.
And I think here's my point, Gary and John. The most important thing about designing a crossover today is something that people don't think about, and that is you want to eliminate reasons why not to buy. And if you didn't put 5,000 pounds of towing in this, even though you may not do that 5,000 pounds of towing, if it only tows 3,500, that's a reason not to buy it. And I think you have to eliminate those reasons not to buy, and that will actually bring people to your brand. Because if you have something that limits the vehicle, you give everybody everything in every box. Every box is checked.
So let me ask you this, guys. Do you think that the fact that it's built in Korea is a reason not to buy? I know I've gone political, but it's part of the market today.
No, I don't think so.
I think most people will not even know that it was made in Korea. However, the Telluride, the Kia, is made in the U.S., and I would fully expect Kia to say made in the USA and make a big deal out of it in this market.
Yeah, I mean, they have, and in a lot of their messaging, they're talking about built and designed in America. Designed in California, built in Georgia, so they hit both coasts.
This was designed here.
Yeah, I mean, so here, this is the interesting thing about that, and we've heard this from Hyundai before. Hyundai have 3 design centers, like Frankfurt, Southern California, and they also have one in Korea. Those design systems, or those design offices, work on 8-hour shifts, and they rotate between them. So the guys in Korea will design for 8 hours, and then those guys in California will pick up where that 8 hours finished and continue with those designs, and then the guys in Germany will pick up there on the other end. And so they're all working on the same project around the clock. So it's a 24-hour design studio just in 3 different continents. So, is it really designed in the US? Yes, I'm sure certain parts were.
So I think there's a lead design office, and then the others work to it. And this was the lead design office because of the market.
So another reason perhaps not to buy. When the Jeep Cherokee first came out, it had very similar styling, right? It had the daylight driving lights on top, and then the main headlights in the bottom, and then they refreshed it and they made it more traditional. Well, both this vehicle and, of course, the Kona have that same kind of design language where you've got the top lights are DLRs and the bottom lights are the main driving lights. I think a lot of people are put off by that. I think that's a very bold move, and yet, these guys have gone with it.
Yeah, Chevy did it in the Blazer.
Yeah, but I'll tell you one thing that Jeep said is this was a new segment for them to get into when they did. They felt they were a challenger. They felt they had to stand apart from others once they established the vehicle. This is them telling the story, okay? This is not me saying that's what had happened. So once the vehicle was established, they toned it back, making it more normal. Wonder if that'll happen with a refresh with this one.
Yeah, I don't know. It's certainly bold. It's one of those things that some people may love and a lot of people may hate, or a lot of people may love and some people may hate.
Roman, you said you felt like you were sitting behind the wheel of a BMW when you were...
The X7 specifically.
And so why is that?
I think the interior materials are close to that BMW standard. You look at the stitching in the seats, you look at the pattern in the covers on the speakers, right? It's all very high-end, very expensive. It just feels and smells and gives you an impression of a car that's punching above its weight class. Mm-hmm. Not quite X7, but, darn close.
Well, I think we need to wrap this segment up, but final thoughts, Nick.
I think it's going to be a big hit for them. The question is, this being made in Korea is still subject to possible tariffs. The price may waver. Right now it's pretty similar to the Kia Telluride, but ultimately the Kia Telluride might have the advantage with the built in America portion. I think this is everything everybody wants. It's definitely something I would shop for. I'm in the market for this size of vehicle, so it's perfect for everybody. The question being, will gas prices stay where they are, or will we see a spike in gas prices? I think at 22 miles a gallon fuel economy, this might put some people out of the budget of buying a full-size SUV.
Roman, your thoughts?
I think the Atlas, the Highlander, the Pilot, even the Explorer need to up their game. That's that simple.
That's great. Gary?
Even after you've seen the new Explorer last week, you think they need to up their game?
Well, I haven't driven the new Explorer, so that was Andre on our team.
Right.
But yeah, this sets the bar pretty high.
Gary, final thoughts for the show?
I think Roman just put it exactly. I mean, it set the bar very high, and as you indicated, John, they're late to the party, and I think maybe being late was a certain advantage here, that they said to themselves, you know what, let's make sure that we get this thing right. Let's make sure that we check the boxes off, and let's sure we create a vehicle that maybe Nik's dogs would be happy to be in, but Nik would not like them to be romping around within.
Real good. Well, Nik, Roman, thanks so much for showing up and giving us your thoughts and insights on this vehicle. With that, we're going to wrap it up. I hope you've enjoyed the show. We're giving you a little bit of a taste of what it's like to go on these media launches. And we've definitely given you something of a deep dive into this new Palisade from Hyundai. But signing off right now, thanks for having tuned in.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion. Lear, a global leader in automotive seating and electrical systems. And by Borg-Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world.
Visit our website, Autoline.tv, where you can watch us live Thursday afternoons. Get your daily fix with Autoline Daily and in-depth analysis and interviews with Autoline This Week. There's all that and much more at Autoline.tv.